object, or using this spread operator, we can copy the elements of one array into another array. What is the use of the spread operator? Means using the spread operator, we can copy the properties of one object into another object, and we can copy the elements of one array into the another array. Okay, so your spread operator looks something like this: 3 dots, then your object name, or 3 dots, your array name. Okay, so your spread operator looks something like this. Now, what is the purpose of this? It is used to copy properties of one object into another object, and it is used to copy elements of one array into another array. Okay, it's very important operator. Remember, copy, it will just copy the things. Okay, let's see one practical example. I'm just creating here spread.js. Suppose I have a object 1 with some properties. Maybe I'm adding here username, something like, okay, Rajesh Verma. Let's suppose I have city, something like Delhi, and maybe I have ID, like some ID. Maybe I can have gender, something like male. Okay, let's assume that we have an object in that we have 4 properties. Now I am creating one more object, where object 2. Now this object is empty. Now in this object, I want to copy all these 4 properties. All these 4 properties I want to copy here. How to copy? Simply use this spread operator and your object name. So our object name is obj1, obj1. What we are saying that whatever properties you have in the obj1, you just copy here. Now if I do the console.log of obj2, it will print all these properties. It will print all these properties in obj. If I go back to my terminal, okay, now here if I just use the command node space spread. Now see, it is printing as it is all the properties. It is printing as it is all the properties. If you want, you can add some new properties here. Maybe I will add here email. Email as rajesh@gmail.com. So this is the new property which I am adding. First, I am copying all the properties of my obj1. Then I am adding one new property. Now, if I just clear it and just go and execute it. Now see, here email got added. Email got added. Suppose I want to update city. I want to update city from Delhi to Pune. I want to update my city. So what I can do, I can rewrite that city property and I can say here Pune. Now you know, right? In your object, if you have 2 properties with the same key, then the values will override. Values will override here. Now see, again if I execute it, now city will be Pune. City will be Pune. So basically, whenever you use spread operator, first it will copy all the properties. Once all the properties are copied, then these 2 properties will be added. Now already there is a property called city. Already in your obj1, there is a property called city. So if already the property exists, then in that case, it will just override the value. It will just override the value. So here we have just copied the object. In the same way, I can have array also. Suppose here I'm adding something like array1. And in this, let's assume that I have some data. Okay, here I have some 100. Here maybe something like Ria. Maybe here gender female. Okay, here maybe something like salary. Okay, I can have city. Now suppose I am creating array2. Now this is empty array. Now in this array, I want to copy all these elements. I want to copy all these elements. So what we will do? Simply we will use spread operator. And now we will add here array name. We will add here array name. And here simply do console.log of array2. Now if I just execute it, okay, let me comment this console. Now see, it is printing all those elements. Whatever elements we have, as it is printing in the array2. If I want, I can add new element here. Maybe I am adding here ria@gmail.com. Now if I save it, now if I go back here, re-execute it, now see, all the code got executed. Now here, ria got added. So all these elements got copied from the array1, and this is the new element which we are adding in the array2. So spread is a special operator. Remember, it is an operator. It is an operator. They will ask what is spread. We have to say it is an operator. What is the purpose of this operator? Just to copy the properties of one object into another object, or copy the elements of one array into another array. Okay. So this is your spread operator. Now let's assume that. So let me just add this code as well here in your paint file. Now let's assume that I have a function, something like f1. Now let's assume this function is taking two parameters, x comma y, and I just want to print this parameter, console.log of x comma y. Now tell me, if I am calling this function, how many arguments I need to pass? I have here two parameters. Now I am calling this function. So whenever I am calling this function, how many arguments I need to pass? I need to pass two arguments, right? Suppose here if I pass 100, comma, some string if I pass like this, okay? Some dummy value. Now if I open my terminal and if I just execute it, now see, it is printing me that both the parameters, 100 and dummy value. Okay, fine. Now suppose if I call this function and if I pass only one parameter, sorry, if I pass only one argument, in that case, tell me this 100 will store in X or this 100 will store in Y? Where 100 will store? Yes. So 100 will store inside X only. Okay. First argument will always store in the first element. So in that case, what Y will print? In Y, what it will print? Yeah, it will print undefined. Okay, it is printing undefined. Okay, fine. Now suppose I am calling the f1 function and I am passing three arguments. In this case, can you tell me in X comma Y, what it will print? If I'm trying to print X comma Y, what it will print? I have two parameters, but I am passing three arguments. So in X and in Y, which argument will be stored? Okay, let's try. So here 100 and 150. So always remember first argument. Okay, always remember first argument will always okay, 1 minute, guys. Now remember always first argument will always store in first parameter. Second argument will always store in the second parameter. First argument will always store in first parameter. Second argument will always store in the second parameter. Okay. And if you have more than two arguments, then all this will be just ignored. All this will be just ignored. Okay. All this will be just ignored. But sometimes I don't want to ignore my arguments. Like maybe I am passing here 5 arguments. Now I don't want to ignore these arguments. I want to catch those arguments. In that case, what we can do, we can go with something called REST parameter. Now, what is REST parameter? Now, REST parameter, it is a special parameter in your JavaScript. Okay. What is REST parameter? It is one of the special parameter. It is a special parameter which is used to hold all the remaining arguments, all the remaining arguments in array format. So what is REST parameter? REST is a special parameter. And what is the purpose of this parameter? It is used to store all the remaining arguments. Suppose if you are passing multiple arguments, then it will store all those arguments in the array format. But one thing we have to remember, REST parameter should be passed as a last parameter always. Okay, so REST parameter we have to pass always as a last parameter. You cannot pass REST parameter in between your parameters or at the first initial level of your parameters. REST parameter should be always last parameter. Okay, should be always last parameter. And how REST parameter looks? It's very similar to spread operator, three dots, and your parameter name. This is how your REST parameter will be. Okay, now if I come back here, now suppose here, if I want to add REST parameter, so simply add three dots and use some parameter name. I'm saying like data. Now this is the REST parameter. Now this REST parameter, you cannot add in between. Suppose I don't want to add here, I want to add after X before Y. You cannot add. It will not allow you to add. You cannot add REST parameter at the initial level also. Here also we cannot add. So REST parameter should be always added. It should be always added as a last parameter. Okay, now here I will try to print that REST parameter. Now my REST parameter name is data. So I'm just trying to console.log data. Let's see what it will print. So simply I will say node REST. Now see, X is printing 100, Y is printing 150, but this REST parameter is printing one array. And in that array, you have all your arguments. It has all your arguments. All these arguments are stored in the array. Now you can pass any number of arguments here. You can pass any number of arguments here. Now see, all the arguments are stored in this array. In this array. Suppose if you are only passing the rest parameter, then all the arguments will be stored here. Okay, here I need to remove x comma y. So let me re-execute. Now see, all the arguments are stored in the rest parameter. So rest parameter should be the last parameter. It should be the last parameter. So in your interviews, they will ask, what is the difference between rest and spread? Difference between rest and spread. Actually, these both are two different things. Okay, there is no relation between them, but they looks very similar. They looks very similar, but the syntax wise, they both are very similar. In rest operator also, sorry, in rest parameter also, we will use 3 dots and then rest parameter name. And when it comes to spread operator here also 3 dots. Here our object name or array name. Object or array name. Okay, that is the reason. This is one of the interview, one of the famous interview question. So the first difference you have to say, rest is a parameter, spread is operator. Spread operator we can pass inside the block. Rest parameter we can pass inside the parenthesis. Spread operator is used to copy the object or array elements and properties. Rest parameter is used to hold the remaining arguments. It is used to hold the remaining arguments. So this is how you can explain the difference between rest and spread. Rest and spread. Okay. So here we have rest parameter. Here we have spread operator. Spread operator. Yeah. Now, do you guys have the idea about destructuring in JavaScript? What is the meaning of destructuring in JavaScript? Anybody knows what is destructuring in the JavaScript? Okay, so let me explain you what is destructuring. Destructuring of array or object. I got few answers. Okay, destructuring of array or objects. Let's try to understand. So what is destructuring? Basically, destructuring is just a technique in JavaScript. It is a technique in JavaScript to unpack properties or elements from the object or array. What is destructuring? It is one technique in JavaScript. And what is the purpose of this technique? The purpose of this technique is to unpack properties or elements from the object or array. So what is the meaning of this? Let's try to understand. So here, let me just create destructuring dot JS. Okay, now all these concepts we are going to use in React. Spread operator, rest parameter, destructuring, all this will be used in React. Extensively, all this will be used. Maybe in your Angular also it will be used. In your Angular also it will be used. So very, very important, all these concepts are. Suppose I have an object. In this object, let's assume that I have some property. Okay, let me just copy the property from here. I have this many properties. Now, let's assume that this city value I want to use at 100 places. In my file, I want to use that city value at 100 places, 100 different places. Now, can you tell me how to access this city? If I want to access this city, how to access this city from the object? If I want to access this city, how to access it from the object? Yes, we have to say object name dot city. Am I right? We have to call object dot city. It means at all the 100 places, we have to use this syntax only. Object dot city, object dot city, object dot city, object dot city. Okay. So if you write like this each and every time object dot city, it doesn't look that great. So what we can do, we can unpack the values from this object. How to unpack the values means, for that we will use one technique called destructuring. And how to use that technique means, simply define your scope statement, use curly braces equals to your object name. So in my case, object name is obj. Here I am just using obj. Now from this object, which values you want, which properties you want to unpack, you just add the keys of those properties. For example, I want to unpack city and gender. So simply I will say city comma gender. Now, once I have unpacked it, now if I want to use city and gender anywhere in my file, I need not to use object name. Simply I can use that property name directly now. Now if I say city comma gender, it should print Delhi and mail. Now clear? Now if I go back here and if I just try to execute it, node destructuring. Now see, I got Delhi and mail. Guys, 1 minute. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, someone was on the road bell. That is the reason. Okay. Now, see, here we have unpacked it. Now, see, if I am trying to print city comma gender, it is printing me Delhi mail. Now, I did not unpack this username and ID. Suppose if I try to access your ID, and let's see what it will print. Now, it is giving me error. It is giving me reference error. What it is saying? ID is not defined. It is saying that you did not define ID, but you are trying to print it. but it is not giving that error for city and gender because we have used destructuring technique. We have just unpacked it. Suppose if I unpack my ID also, now I can use my ID as well. Now see, again, if I just try to execute it, now I'm able to access ID. Now, once I have destructured, now wherever I want to use these properties, no need to use my object name, no need to use that dot operator. Directly, I can use properties key name. I can use at 100 places. This technique we call as a destructuring. So this is object destructuring. This we call as a object destructuring. In your object destructuring, order doesn't matter. Order doesn't matter. Okay, if I want, I can say like this also, ID, comma, gender, comma, city. Here, order doesn't matter. Okay, now if I try to execute, now see, let me just save it. Now, let me re-execute. Now see, I got Delhi, I got mail, I got 101. Here, order doesn't matter. Now in my console, my first variable I am printing city, so properly it printed Delhi. Here I am printing gender, it printed male. Here I am trying to print ID, it printed ID. So here order doesn't matter. You can add in any order, you can unpack in any order. Okay, so remember, in object destructuring, order doesn't matter. Now same thing I can do with array also. Suppose if I have array where something like product details. Okay, let's suppose I'm just adding some product names here, maybe something like iPhone 14 Pro, maybe here something like Vivo 827, something like Samsung S23, Samsung, here something like A34. Here I want to add one more, iPhone 12 or 13. Now I have one array, in that I have some data. Now if you want to access this particular element, what you need to do? You have to say array name, then you have to add square brackets, and in that you have to add index number. You have to add index number, right? For example, if I want to do console.log, let's suppose I want to access this value, Samsung A23. Then what I need to do? I have to use product details. I have to take my array name, then square brackets. Then I have to identify the index number 0, 1, 2, 3. So I need to add here 3. Save it. Now I need to execute it. Now see, I got Samsung A34. Samsung A34. Like this, if you want to access this Vivo, again you have to do product details of 1. And like this, these two elements, if you want to use at multiple places in your program or in your file, then you have to always use your array name, then you have to add index. Array name, you have to add index. So instead of this, what we can do, we can go with the destructuring technique. Now, if you want to do array destructuring, then the syntax is little bit different. The syntax is something like this. We have to use scope statement, space, square brackets. Here we have to use square brackets equals to our array name. What is our array name? Product details. Now, inside the square brackets, you have to take some references. You have to take variables, or you can call reference. For example, here I am saying like whatever you want, you can take. Okay, I'm just taking here element 1. Okay, I'm taking element 2. And you can add any number of references, but you have to add comma. You have to separate with comma. Element 3. Now, in this case, what happens? This is our array, right? So in this array, this is the first element. So first element will store in the first reference. Second element will store in the second reference. Third element will store in the third reference. And it will follow the order. Always first element will store in the first reference. Second element will store in second reference. Third element will store in third reference. Now, if I do console.log here, and in that, if I try to print element 1, comma, element 2, comma, element 3. Now let's see what it will print. Now, if I just clear this and if I just execute it, now see, it is printing iPhone 14 Pro, Vivo A24, Samsung S23. It printed in the sequence. So in your array, order matters. In your array, order matters, and all your values will be unpacked in the order only. In order only, it will unpack. Now, if you ask me, so in this reference or in this variable, I want to store iPhone 13. Is it possible? No, it's not possible. Okay. In your array, order matters. In your array, order matters. Now, these are just variable names or reference names. You can take whatever you want. Whatever names you want, you can take. But in your first reference, always first element will be stored. In second reference, second element, third reference, third element. So how many elements you have, that many references you can take. And once you have destructured it, once you have unpacked it, then you can directly use this reference names to access the values of your array element. You can use this reference names to access the values of your array element. Okay, so this is your array destructuring. This is your object destructuring. Object destructuring में order doesn't matter, but in array destructuring, order matters. Understood? Array and object destructuring. Okay, let me just copy this first. Okay. So here I will just say object destructuring. Object destructuring. Now, in the same way, you have array also. This is your array destructuring. Array destructuring. Okay. Good. So now you know what is spread operator, you know what is rest parameter, you know object destructuring, you know array destructuring. Now from here we are just focusing on ES6 concepts. We are learning ES6 concepts. Now from here, whatever concepts we are learning all comes under your ES6. Your closures, call, apply, bind, promises, object-oriented programming, and whatever these topics I am teaching you, arrow functions, everything comes under ES6. Okay. Now, let's understand about arrow functions. Let's understand about arrow functions. How to create arrow functions in JavaScript. So to create arrow functions in JavaScript, simply you have to use parenthesis. Then you have to create one arrow. How to create arrow? Just use this equal to symbol and greater than symbol. One arrow will be created. Then open curly brace, close curly brace. And this function you assign to one variable. You assign to one variable. Suppose I am saying here my function. Now this is called arrow function. This is called arrow function. Now inside this, we can write whatever code you want. Inside this, whatever code you want, you can write. Here, whatever code you want to write. Here, you can pass your parameters. Any number of parameters you can pass. If you want, you can return something from here. You can return something from here. Now, if you want to call your arrow function, then you have to use this variable name, myFN. This is how we call our arrow functions. So this is the syntax we use to create arrow functions. Here just they have removed that function keyword. It is little easy to create function compared to your normal function. Okay, now there are some differences between arrow functions and normal functions. What are those differences? Let's try to understand. Okay, so come back here. I'm just creating one arrow.js. Here I'm creating one function, normal function. Okay, something like fn. Now let's assume inside this function, I want to just add return statement. And I want to return some value here. Okay, I'm returning something. Maybe I'm returning here one string. Now, in your normal function, if you want to add only one line and that to return statement, in that case also, you have to add this curly brace. It's a mandatory rule. You have multi-lines or you are writing one line. You have to add this block. Without block, you cannot write your statements inside your normal function. In arrow function, in your arrow function, if you want to add only one statement and that too it has one return statement, in that case, you can write your arrow function in a very shorter way. What is that shorter way? Open your parenthesis, add your arrow, and whatever statement you want to return, you just write that statement. Here I'm saying I am returning from arrow function. Here I will say I am returning from normal function. So the benefit of your arrow function is if you have only one statement in the function and that too it is a return statement, then in that case you can follow this syntax. No need to add return statement the way we have added here. No need to add this curly braces the way we have added here. This is the shorter way. And if I just try console.log and if I call my arrow function, now what this arrow function is going to do, it will just return this string. It will just return this string. Now see in your console, you will be able to see this one. Now here if I just execute node arrow, now see here I am returning from arrow function. This is the one difference. First difference, like if you have only one statement and that to return statement, this is the shorter way that you can use for arrow function. But for your normal function, you don't have any option. You have to add return statement. You have to add this blocks. Second difference is in normal function, you have to use function keyword. You have to use function keyword. Without function keyword, now you cannot create normal function. But here, no need to use any function keyword. No need to use any function keyword. That you can tell as a second difference. You have one more important difference. What is that difference means? For example, if I have an object and in this object, let's assume I have username as Raj and city as Bangalore. And let's suppose I have a function called print. I have here normal function, something called print. Now inside this function, if I use one special keyword, called this, inside this function, if I am using a special keyword called this, now this key is going to point, this key will point to the current object. Now here this keyword is pointing to current object, this is nothing but your current object. Now if I say here this dot, username, in that case internally it means we are doing obj1 dot username. It will treat this as a current object. Okay, now suppose if I print here, if I call this obj1 dot, if I call this print function, now you see it will print Raj. Now see it is printing Raj here. If I do here comma this dot ct, so here this is just a special keyword which is pointing to current object, that's it. Now again if I just execute here, now see again I got here Raj Bangalore. This is with your normal function. Suppose if I have one more object, I will just copy this. I have one more object, maybe object 2. In this, let's suppose instead of normal function, I am going with arrow function. If I am defining arrow function, in your arrow function, this keyword will not point, it will not point to the current object. In this case, this will point to our global object in JavaScript, that is window. It will point to the window. Now see, if I just try to call this object to dot print, now let's see what it will print. It should print undefined. See, it is printing undefined. Because here this is pointing to window object. In your arrow function, if you use this keyword, it will point to window object. In your normal function, if you use this will point to current object. This is the main difference. Between arrow function and normal function. So whenever in your interviews they are asking, can you explain me the differences between arrow and normal? This one point they are expecting from you. You explain 5 differences, 3 differences, 4 differences, whatever differences you are explaining, that doesn't matter. But this is the difference they are expecting. This is the one difference they are expecting from you. And this one, that shorter way of writing. This is one more differences they are expecting. These are the 2 differences minimum they are expecting from you. These are the 2 main differences between your arrow function and normal function. Yes, Govind. Okay. So this is the difference between your arrow function and normal function. In React, we will use only arrow functions. Like we will use normal functions also, and we will use arrow functions also. So if you want to define callback functions, or if you want to define event handlers, we will go with callback function, this arrow functions only. We will go with arrow functions only. So this is one more difference you have to remember about arrow functions. We have one more concept called closures. Closures in JavaScript. Now, what are closures in JavaScript? Anybody knows what is closures in JavaScript? What are closures in JavaScript? Okay, it is a technique to access scope of outer function inside the inner function. It is a technique to access scope of outer functions inside the inner function. Or in simple words, if I want to say, it is a technique to define a function inside another function. It is a technique of defining a function into another function. What is the meaning of that? Suppose if I have a function here, something like outer. In this function, I can write whatever logic I want to write. Now, inside this function, I can define one more function. And if I want, I can return this inner function. I can return this inner function. Now, this technique of defining a function into the another function, and this inner function can access the scope. Scope means if you define any variables here, all those variables will be accessible in your inner function. It will be accessible in your inner function. This technique we call as a closures in JavaScript. This technique we call as a closure in JavaScript. Okay, let's see one example. If I say here closure.js, suppose I am defining function outer. Inside this function, let's suppose I am declaring a variable. Okay, here I am just trying to print console.log of. I am saying here outer function, comma city. Now, inside this function, if you are defining one more function, and in this function, you can write whatever logic you want to write. Whatever you want, you can write. For example, let's suppose this function is taking x comma y. Now here, simply I will say something like console.log of x plus y. Console.log of ct. Now here simply I will add inner function. Now if I want, I can return this inner function. If you want, you can return this inner function like this, or else if you want, inside this only you can call directly this inner function like this. 10, 20. Now if I call my outer function, and if I execute it, let's see what it will print. See, it is printing outer function Delhi, then 30, 10 plus 20, 30, then inner function again Delhi. See, here we are able to access the scope of our outer function inside the inner function. This is one way. Or else what you can do, simply you can return it. You can simply return inner. Now, if you are returning inner means, whenever you call outer, this is going to return one function. So just catch in one variable, var inner, or whatever variable name you want to take, you can take. I'm saying taking here fn inner. Now inside this variable, this inner function will be stored. And simply you can call here fn inner. Now again, if I execute it, again I got the same result. But here I need to pass arguments, right? So I am passing 5, 5. Again, if I execute, I got the result. See, here whenever you call the outer function execution finished. Whenever the execution of your outer function finishes, all your variables will get destroyed. And we are calling this inner function after the completion of outer function. But still in inner function, we are able to access the scope of outer function. We are able to access the scope of outer function because of closure concept. Because of closure concept. Because of closure concept. So this technique defining a function inside another function, and this inner function can access the variables or any statements of outer function inside their inner functions. This technique we are going to call as a closures. We are going to call as a closures in JavaScript. Okay. So there are so many cases you will come to know. Now, if I explain, if I tell you use case, you won't understand. So this is the closures concept in your JavaScript. Okay. Now see, this is the variable we have defined here, which is defined in outer function, but we are able to access in inner function also, though the execution of outer function is finished. Now, whenever I called here outer function got executed, it returned inner function. Now, inner function stored here. Outer function execution has been finished. But still, inside this inner function, we are able to access the outer function content. That is because of closures. Okay. This is closures in JavaScript. Now, in tomorrow's session, tomorrow we will have session, guys. Okay, tomorrow we have a session. So I will inform management also today itself. So tomorrow we have session. And in tomorrow's session, we will cover one of the very important topic. Okay, something called module concept. And I will cover one more important topic, call, apply, bind. So today someone asked in arrow functions, how can we make sure that our this will point to current object? That you will understand in call, apply, bind. So we are going to understand something called module pattern concept. Basically, it's a pattern. And something called call, apply, bind. Call, apply, bind. So once if we are able to cover these topics, then I will explain you what is hoisting, shadowing in JavaScript. Okay, so these are the topic, and once we understood this, then we will understand about scope statements. Like what is the difference between var, let, const? If you remember, while understanding about the variable concept, I told there are 3 ways to define the variable: var, let, const. That we will discuss. When to use var, when to use let, when to use const, what is the difference between them? That everything we will understand about it. Okay. Now, all these are small concepts, but very important concepts. So in your interview perspective also, all these concepts are very important. So we will cover all these concepts in tomorrow's session. And if possible, like I'm not sure, but if possible, this Sunday we will have a session. So I'm not promising. In case if there is any session on Sunday, you guys will come to know tomorrow only. Okay. So if there is any session on Sunday, you will come to know tomorrow. If there is no session on Sunday, I won't announce anything. If I announce something, then only we will have the session on Sunday. Or else we will not have any session on Sunday. Yeah. So I will push this code and this pen file as well. Don't worry, guys. Everything will be covered. Okay. Before I leave, all the topics will be covered. Even our pending CSS topics will be covered. Don't worry about that. Yeah, I have updated, guys. Code I have updated in the Git. Okay. Just now I have updated all the code. So till date, everything is present in your Git repository. You can download from there.